Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Janmadyasya yato nivayad itaratas charte suavigyasvarat.
Janmadyasya yatam vaditaratas chate svavigyasvarat.
Tene Brahma Daya Adhikavaye Muyanti Yat Surayaha.
Tene Brahma Udaya Adhikavaye Muyanti Yat Suraya.
Tejo Varimadam Yata Vinimayo Yatrati Sargo Mrisha.
Tejo Varimridan Jata Vinimayo Jatratri Sargo Mrisya.
Damna Svina Sada Nirasta Kuhakam Satyam Param Dimahi.
Dhamna Svena Sada Nirasta Kuhakam Satyam Param Dimahi.
O my Lord, Shri Krishna, son of Vasudeva.
O my Lord, Shri Krishna, son of Vasudeva.
O all-pervading personality of Godhead.
O all-pervading personality of Godhead.
Offer my respectful obeisances unto you.
Offer my respectful obeisances unto you.
I meditate upon Lord Shri Krishna because he is the absolute truth.
I meditate upon Lord Shri Krishna because he is the absolute
and the
truth.
primeval cause of all causes.
And the primeval cause of all causes.
Of the creation, sustenance, and destruction of manifested universes.
The creation, sustenance, and destruction of manifested universes.
He is directly and indirectly conscious of all
He
manifestations.
is directly and indirectly conscious of all manifestations.
And he's independent because there's no other cause beyond him.
And he is independent because there is no other cause beyond him.
It is he only who first imparted the Vedic knowledge unto the heart of Brahmaji,
It is he only who first imparted Vedic knowledge into the heart of Brahmaji,
the original living being.
the original living being.
By him, even the great sages and demigods are placed into illusion.
By him, even the great sages and demigods are placed into illusion.
As one is bewildered by the illusory representations
As one is bewildered by the illusory representation
of water seen on fire or land seen on water.
of water seen the fire, land seen the water.
Only because of him do the material universes
Only because of him do the material universes
appear factual, although they are unreal.
appear actual, although they are unreal.
I therefore meditate upon him, Lord Shri Krishna,
I therefore meditate upon him, Lord,
who is eternally existent in the transcendental abode,
who is eternally existent in the transcendental world,
which is forever free from the illusory representations of the material world.
which is forever free from the illusory representation of
I
material.
meditate upon him, for he is the absolute truth.
I meditate upon him, for he is the absolute truth.
Dharma projita kaitravatra
Dharma prujita kaitavatra
paramo nirmatsanam satam.
paramo nirmasaranam satam
Paramo nirmatsanam satam. Vedyam vastavam atra vastu.
Vedyam vastavam astra vastu
Shivadam tapa trayon mulanam.
Shivadam tapo trayumulanam
Srimad Bhagvate Mahamuni Krite.
Srimad Bhagvatam Mahamuni
Kim va parir ishvaraha.
Kimva paririshvaraha
Sadyo hridi avarudyate tra.
Sadyo rudya varudya titra
Kriti behi sususabis takshanat.
Kritibhi sushushovis tatkyanat.
Just 1 second, I'm looking up something. Completely rejecting all religious activities which are materially motivated.
Completely rejecting all religious activities which are materially motivated.
This Bhagavata Purana propounds the highest truth,
His Bhagavad Puran propels the highest truth,
which is understandable by those devotees who are fully pure in heart.
which is understandable by those devotees who are fully pure.
The highest truth is reality distinguished from illusion for the welfare of all.
The highest truth, their reality distinguished from illusion for the welfare of all.
Such truth uproots the threefold miseries.
Such a truth uproots the threefold misery.
This beautiful Bhagavatam, compiled by the great sage Vyasadeva in his maturity,
This beautiful Bhagavatam compiled by great sages Deva's maturity
is sufficient in itself for God realization.
is sufficient itself for God realization.
What is the need of any other scripture?
What is the need of the other scripture?
As soon as one attentively and submissively hears the message of Bhagavatam,
As soon as attentively and submissively hears the message of Bhagavatam,
by this culture of knowledge,
by this culture of
the
knowledge,
Supreme Lord is established within his heart.
the Supreme Lord is established within his heart.
Nigama kalpataror galitam phalam.
Nigama kalpataror galitam phalam,
Sukamukad amrita dravya samyutam.
Sukam karamrita dravasangita,
Pibata Bhagavatam rasam alayam.
Vibhata Bhagavatam rasamala,
Muhur aho raskabu vibhavukaha.
Mura hura sikabu vibhavuka.
O expert and thoughtful men, relish Srimad Bhagavatam.
explain thoughtfully and really Srimad Bhagavatam.
The mature fruit of the desire to read Vedic literatures.
Mature fruit they desire to read
It emanated from the lips of Sri Sukadeva Goswami.
emanated from the lips of Sri Sukadeva Goswami.
Therefore, this fruit has become even more tasteful,
Therefore, this fruit becomes even more tasteful.
although its nectarian juice was already relishable for all,
Although its nectarian juice was already relishable for all,
including liberated souls.
including liberated souls.
Shingatam Swakata Krishna,
Sambatam Svakata Krishna.
Punya Shravana Kirtana,
Punya Shravana Kirtana.
Hiryantakstohi Bhadrani,
Bhadrani.
Vidunati Srihitsatam.
Dunati.
To hear about Krishna from Vedic literatures,
To hear about Krishna from Bhagavad Gita,
or to hear from him directly through the Bhagavad Gita,
or to hear from you directly from the Bhagavad
is itself righteous activity.
It is self-righteous activity.
And for one who hears about Krishna,
For one who hears about
Lord Krishna, who is dwelling in everyone's heart,
Lord Krishna is dwelling within everyone's
acts as a best wishing friend, and purifies the devotee who constantly engages in hearing of him.
purified his voice, constantly engaged with him.
Nasta presu bhadresu
Nasta Preshwar Bhagavad
nityam bhagavata sevaya
Nityam Bhagavata
bhagavati uttamasloke
Bhagavati Uttamasloke
bhaktir bhavati naistaki.
Bhakti Bhagavati Maistri.
In this way, a devotee naturally develops his dormant transcendental knowledge.
In this way, the devotee naturally develops his dormant transcendental knowledge.
As he hears more about Krishna from the Bhagavatam
As he hears more about Krishna from the Bhagavad
and from the devotees,
from the devotees,
he becomes fixed in the devotional service of the Lord.
he becomes fixed in devotional service of the Lord.
Tadarajas tamo bhava kama lubha dayaschaye cheta etarana vidam stitvam sattve prasidati. By development of devotional service, one becomes freed from the modes of passion and ignorance, and thus material lust and avarice are diminished. Evam prasana manaso bhagavad bhakti yogataha bhagavad tattva vijnanam mukta sangasya jayate. When these impurities are wiped away, the candidate remains steady in his position of pure goodness, becomes enlivened by devotional service, and understands the science of God perfectly. Vidyate hridaya grantis, chidyante sarvasamsaya, siyante chasya karmani, drista evat manishware. Thus Bhakti Yoga severs the heart not of material affection, and enables one to come at once to the stage of samsayam samagram, understanding of the supreme absolute truth, personality of Godhead. Therefore, only by hearing from Krishna or from his devotee in Krishna consciousness can one understand the science of Krishna. Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 2, Chapter 1, verse number 10. Tadaham te vidasyami maha porushiko bhavan yasya shraddha datam asu shan mukunde mati sati. Translation: that very Srimad Bhagavatam I shall recite before you, because you are the most sincere devotee of Lord Krishna. One who gives full attention and respect to hearing Srimad Bhagavatam achieves unflinching faith in the Supreme Lord, the giver of salvation. Purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Srimad Bhagavatam is recognized Vedic wisdom, and the system of receiving Vedic knowledge is called Avaroha Panta, or the process of receiving transcendental knowledge through bona fide disciplic succession. For advancement of material knowledge, there is a need for personal ability and researching aptitude, but in the case of spiritual knowledge, all progress depends more or less on the mercy of the spiritual master. The spiritual master must be satisfied with the disciple. Only then is knowledge automatically manifest before the student of spiritual science. The process should not, however, be misunderstood to be something like magical feats, whereby the spiritual master acts like a magician and injects spiritual knowledge into the disciple as if surcharging him with an electrical current. This is in reference specifically to Ramakrishna and Vivekananda, where if you ever read the biography of Ramakrishna, at one point he zaps Vivekananda with this electrical charge of so-called realization, and then Ramakrishna, faints in exhaustion, and Vivekananda is surcharged. Of course, Prabhupada is making this sound rightfully as nonsense. The process should not, however, be misunderstood to be something like magical feats whereby the spiritual master acts like a magician and injects spiritual knowledge into his disciple as if surcharging him with an electrical current. The bona fide spiritual master reasonably explains everything to the disciple on the authorities of Vedic wisdom. The disciple can receive such teachings not exactly intellectually, but by submissive inquiries and a service attitude. So now that's a very big distinction between intellectually understanding and the spiritual process of submissive inquiries or submissive questions and a service attitude. The idea is that both the spiritual master and his disciple must be bona fide. In this case, the spiritual master, Sukadeva Goswami, is ready to recite exactly what he has learned from his great father, Srila Vyasadeva. And the disciple, Maharaj Pariksit, is a great devotee of Lord Krishna. A devotee of Lord Krishna is he who believes sincerely that by becoming a devotee of the Lord, one becomes fully equipped with everything spiritual. So this is a factor of faith. In other words, if one has faith in Krishna, that means that they have complete confidence that they don't have to go outside anywhere of Krishna consciousness to have knowledge, that they can get all that knowledge by submissive hearing and inquiries and offering service and regularly attending classes on Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagvatam spoken by genuine devotees. A devotee of Lord Krishna is he who believes sincerely that by becoming a devotee of the Lord, one becomes fully equipped with everything spiritual. So this is also explained in Bhagavad Gita, 4th chapter. 1 second, let me just find this. 4th chapter. Yeah. Shadaval labate jnanam tatpara samyatendriya jnanam ladva param santim achiren adigachati. So in the purport, Prabhupada explains also, such knowledge in Krishna consciousness can be achieved by a faithful person who believes firmly in Krishna. One is called a faithful man who thinks that simply by acting in Krishna consciousness, he can attain the highest perfection. This faith is attained by the discharge of devotional service and by chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, which cleanses one's heart of all material dirt. Over and above this, one should control the senses. A person who is faithful to Krishna and who controls the senses can easily attain perfection in the knowledge of Krishna consciousness without delay. So here he said that a devotee of Krishna is he who believes sincerely that by becoming a devotee of the Lord, one becomes fully equipped with everything spiritual. This teaching is imparted by the Lord himself in the pages of the Bhagavad Gita, in which it is clearly described that the Lord, Sri Krishna, is everything, and that to surrender unto him solely and wholly makes one most perfectly pious man. Vahanam janmanamante gyanavamam prapadyante vasudeva savamiti samhatma sudurlabha. That's that verse. This unflinching faith in Lord Krishna prepares one to become a student of Srimad Bhagvatam. Why? Because Bhagavatam is only about Krishna. So one must be an unalloyed devotee of the Lord to be able to hear Bhagavatam correctly. This unflinching faith in Lord Krishna prepares one to become a student of Srimad Bhagavatam, and one who hears Srimad Bhagavatam from a devotee like Sukadeva Goswami is sure to attain salvation at the end, as Maharaj Pariksit did. The professional reciter of Srimad Bhagavatam and the pseudo-devotees whose faith is based on 1 week's hearing, in other words, he's referring to the Sapta Bhagavata, Saptapad, no, okay, yeah. 7 days recitation of Srimad Bhagavatam. The professional reciter of Srimad Bhagavatam and the pseudo-devotees whose faith is based on 1 week's hearing are different from Sukadeva Goswami and Maharaj Pariksit. Srila Vyasadeva explained Srimad Bhagavatam unto Sukadeva Goswami from the very beginning of the Janmadasya verse, and so Sukadeva Goswami also explained it to the king. Lord Krishna is described as the Mahapurusha in the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 11. In his devotional features, Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is Lord Krishna himself in his devotional attitude, descended on earth to bestow special favors upon the fallen souls of this age of Kali. There are 2 verses particularly suitable to offer as prayers to this Mahapurusha feature of Lord Krishna. And they are as follows. In the end it says, Vande Mahapurusha te charanara vindam. In other words, Purusha means the enjoyer, and Mahapurusha means the supreme enjoyer or the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna. One who deserves to approach the Supreme Lord, Sri Krishna, is called the Mahapurushika. Anyone who hears Srimad Bhagavatam attentively from a bona fide reciter is sure to become a sincere devotee of the Lord who is able to award liberation. There was none so attentive as Maharaj Pariksit in the matter of hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, and there was none so qualified as Sukadeva Goswami to recite the text of Srimad Bhagavatam. Therefore, anyone who follows in the footsteps of either the ideal reciter or the ideal hearer, Sukadeva Goswami and Maharaj Pariksit respectively, will undoubtedly attain salvation like them. Maharaj Pariksit attained salvation by hearing only, and Sukadeva Goswami attained salvation only by reciting. When it says by hearing only, it doesn't mean that Sukadeva Goswami didn't say anything. He asked many, many questions. It's a dialogue where the disciple is asking questions and the guru is answering. Recitation and hearing. Notice it says recitation. That means he knew the Bhagavatam by heart. Sukadeva Goswami knew it by heart. He didn't need any text. Recitation and hearing are 2 processes out of 9 devotional activities. And by strenuously following the principles, either in all or by parts, one can attain the absolute plane. So the complete text of Srimad Bhagavatam, beginning with the Janmadasya verse, up to the last one in the 12th canto, was spoken by Sukadeva Goswami for the attainment of salvation by Maharaj Pariksit. In the Padma Purana, it is mentioned that Gautama Muni advised Maharaj Ambarisha to hear regularly Srimad Bhagavatam. and it was recited by Sukadeva Goswami, and herein it is confirmed that Maharaj Ambarisha heard Srimad Bhagavatam from the very beginning to the end, as it was spoken by Sukadeva Goswami. One who is actually interested in the Bhagavatam, therefore, must not play with it by reading or hearing portion from here and a portion from there. One must follow in the footsteps of great kings like Maharaj Ambarisha or Maharaj Parikshit and hear it from a bona fide representative of Sukadeva Goswami. And the implication here is that one must hear it sequentially, in other words, verse after verse, not jump around. Okay, so this is a wonderful purport. And we can say how fortunate we are that we can sit down peacefully, no noise, no distractions, early in the morning, and hear Srimad Bhagavatam. It's a very, very great blessing. And I wish more people accepted this blessing. But it doesn't matter. I mean, what counts is quality, not quantity. So the quality of hearing, or what you would call reverent hearing, is very, very important, especially for us who are basically neophytes in spiritual knowledge. And so we're learning at least something every day. And that way, the drop-by-drop process of acquiring knowledge, there's two things have to be done slowly. One is gaining money, and two is gaining knowledge. It has to be a gradual and steady process. Every day you pursue the knowledge of Srimad Bhagavatam by attentive and submissive hearing, asking questions, and also participating in the discussion. Okay, so I wanted to continue what we were talking about yesterday. And what were we talking about yesterday? We're talking about the difference between mundane, so-called love, which is actually lust, and the spiritual love. And this is a big topic because everyone is seeking love in this world. But they end up with lust instead of love due to ignorance. But to understand what is pure, unalloyed love for Krishna, that is the goal of life. Prema Pumartha Mahan, Lord Chaitanya said, to attain pure love for the Lord. Savai Pumsa Paro Dharmo, Yata Bhaktira Hoksase, Haituki Pachayata, Yatma Suprasiditi. This is also explained in Bhagavatam, first canto, second chapter, that unalloyed love is the goal of Krishna consciousness. Unalloyed love for Krishna, of course. So, Krishna says in Chaitanya Charitamrita Adi Lila, 4th chapter, 28th and 29th verse, he says, taking these pure devotees with me, I shall descend and sport in various wonderful ways, unknown even in Vaikuntha. I shall broadcast such pastimes by which even I am amazed. So Krishna is explaining that he's going to come down from the spiritual world in order to inspire the fallen souls and give them a glimpse of what's going on eternally in the spiritual world. And not only that, he's going to manifest even some pastimes that are even unknown in Vaikuntha. And it says, and such pastimes by which even I am amazed. And Prabhupada explains, Lord Krishna in the form of Lord Chaitanya educates his devotees to develop progressively to the stage of pure devotional service. Thus he appears periodically as a devotee to take part in various wonderful activities depicted in his sublime philosophy and teachings. So Krishna came 5,000 years ago. Lord Chaitanya came over 500 years ago. And Krishna came as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but he came again 500 years ago as the pure devotee of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So the Lord will go to all kinds of, will make all kinds of efforts to help the living entities come back to Godhead. And Lord Chaitanya is the most merciful of all avatars, because he doesn't ask anyone to surrender to him. He just asks everyone to chant Hare Krishna and attain the perfection of human life. So then Prabhupada says, there are innumerable Vaikuntha planets in the spiritual sky, and in all of them the Lord accepts the service rendered by his eternal devotees in a reverential mood. Therefore, Lord Sri Krishna presents his most confidential pastimes as he enjoys them in the transcendental realm. Such pastimes are so attractive that they attract even the Lord, and thus he relishes them in the form of Lord Chaitanya. So he wants, Lord Krishna is looking for and will accept service rendered by his eternal devotees in a reverential mood. Now, what does that mean, reverential mood? So it's a mood of very serious and very focused on pleasing the Lord. That's why, like, for example, when one is in the temple and one is, let's say they're also on the altar dressing the deities or offering Arti, it should always be very reverential. There should never be any small talk and no giggling, laughing, or anything like that. It should be very focused with extreme, let's say, devout mood of offering this service with love and devotion to the Lord. The same in the kitchen. The kitchen should be, there's no difference between the kitchen and the altar. Both are places where there's serious service being offered to the Lord. So both places, one should be focused completely on pleasing Radha and Krishna, and not joking, not doing anything that's a deviation from reverential service. And devotees should understand this. And everything in the kitchen is just as holy as everything on the altar. And oftentimes people take it for granted that it's just an ordinary kitchen. It's not an ordinary kitchen. It's Krishna's kitchen. And therefore everything has to be extremely clean, and nothing should be neglected. Every little detail has to be taken care of with love and devotion, because it's all meant for pleasing the Lord. Okay, so the next verse, Chaitanya Charitamrita Adi 429, says, the influence of Yogamaya will inspire the gopis with the sentiment that I am their paramour, meaning I am their lover. So here we see in the material world there's Mahamaya, and in the spiritual world there's Yogamaya. Both are types of illusion. But in the material world, Mahamaya has a very, let's say, arduous and severe task. It's to gradually train the fallen souls and to realize that they don't belong in this world, because this world is a world of misery. The material world is a place for misery. It's not a place for attaining bliss. And therefore, Mahamaya will take people away from Krishna. The farther away they get from Krishna, the more they suffer. And this is something people don't understand. The material scientists and philosophers and educators, they're all merely going down the road of self-destruction, you know, because they're going farther and farther away from Krishna as much as they can, and even the religions are mundane. They're mostly concerned about how to, by promising sense gratification in this world and in the so-called heaven. So you see, the Muslims are being promised, 70 virgins in Jannat, in Jannat, in heaven. What does that mean? That means they can have unlimited sex if they go to heaven. You see, what kind of heaven is that? The whole thing is nonsense, right? And the same thing with the Christians, like for example, the pseudo-Christians or the so-called Mormons. They're promising that the family will go back to Godhead and live happily as a family. Now the question is, there's mother and father, and there are the children. But what are they going to look like in eternity? Are the children always going to be little kids, even though they grew up in this world, right? So there's a lot of funny questions that come up about, their perception of the Holy Family being liberated and living eternally in the spiritual world. So there are many holes in the Christian theology, and because of that, instead of attaining Prema Pumartha Mahan, they attain some type of more lasting sense gratification, although it's temporary, on the higher material planets. They don't really reach the spiritual world because they still have material desires. They still have the conception of the body, material body. The idea that they bury the body and then those bodies are going to be resurrected sometime in the future and then judged, and then they can ascend to the so-called heaven in that body. So all these things are due to speculation over a long period of time and ritualizing everything and basically deteriorating to promising material happiness, right? So that's Maya in the material world, and Maya's job is to give people material success and then smash them, either right away or very slowly, and make them extremely frustrated with material life. Okay, but in the spiritual world, the Yoga Maya inspires people to be more and more affectionate to Krishna. And let's hear how that happens. Yogamaya is the name of the internal potency that makes the Lord forget himself and become an object of love for his pure devotee in different transcendental mellows. Now, wait a minute. How can Krishna forget himself? This is very interesting. In other words, what is he going to forget? He's going to forget that he's completely self-sufficient. When you're self-sufficient, you don't need anybody else doing anything for you. And you don't need reciprocation with anyone because you're completely self-satisfied. But in order to reciprocate with his devotees, he has to forget himself and become an object of love for his pure devotee in different transcendental mellows. So he's going to become the son of Nanda Maharaj and Yasoda Mai, or Vasudeva and Devaki. He's going to become the friend of Arjuna and other cowherd boys. He's going to become the master of, let's say, Hanuman. He's going to become the object, supreme object for people who have neutrality. In other words, they are the grass, the trees, the leaves, the flowers in the spiritual world. They're always overwhelmed with expectation of Krishna touching them. So he's the supreme master, let's say, supreme personality in that case. So, and then he's a conjugal lover. So therefore he cannot be self-satisfied to assume those different roles. He has to forget himself. So, and become an object of love for his pure devotee in different transcendental mellows. Those mellows, those rasas, those are exchanges of love and devotion. This Yogamaya potency creates a spiritual sentiment in the minds of the damsels of Vraja, by which they think of Lord Krishna as their paramour. So now we're talking about something very, when you say a spiritual sentiment, it's something that experienced in the mind, not the mundane mind, but the transcendental mind of the gopis. This sentiment is never to be compared to mundane, illicit sexual love. It has nothing to do with sexual psychology, although the pure love of such devotees seems to be sexual. It has, one should know for certain that nothing can exist in this cosmic manifestation that has no real counterpart in the spiritual field. In other words, everything we see here is a perverted, let's say, reflection of what's in the spiritual world. In the spiritual world, the same thing is perfect and complete and not tainted with any lust, greed, or so forth. It's pure expression of love. Whereas here, it's perverted, it's contaminated. It's the complete opposite, although it looks the same. It's just like you go to the amusement park, into the House of Mirrors. Now, in the House of Mirrors, there are mirrors all around you, but they're not ordinary mirrors. They're purposely made to distort the way you look. So in one mirror, you look really fat and bloated, right? Another mirror, you look really skinny and very drained of energy, right? So they're special mirrors, and you go through that, and you see the surreal visions of yourself, right? So in the same way, in the material world, what we're seeing is like in that House of Mirrors. We don't actually see who we are. We see these aberrant and distorted images, and we don't really see the real thing. So one should know for certain that nothing can exist in the cosmic manifestation that has no real counterpart in the spiritual field. So in Vaikuntha, the real relationship of the devotee with Krishna is revealed in 5 different types of rasas. All material manifestations are emanations of the transcendence. The erotic principles of amorous love reflected in mixed material values are perverted reflections of the reality of spirit. But one cannot understand the reality unless one is sufficiently educated in the spiritual science. So, being sufficiently educated is this regulated hearing and discussion. Just like right now, we're hearing and we're discussing and thinking about what is the difference between love in the spiritual world and so-called love in the material world. Well, it's the difference between gold and iron. They're both metals, but gold is precious and iron is something very mundane thing. And there's no real comparison of the two. So we need to be educated in the spiritual science, because the erotic principles of amorous love, reflected in mixed material values, are perverted reflections of the reality of spirit. So we're in the house of mirrors in this world, and everything is distorted, everything is perverted, everything is not what it really is. And when we see or we hear about the real thing, we can't accept it. We try and understand it in terms of this perverted reflection that we are more familiar with. So the next verse says, "Neither the gopis nor I shall notice this, for our minds will always be entranced by one another's beauty and qualities." So they don't notice. Krishna doesn't notice that, in the sense that he's forgotten himself, that he's self-sufficient. And the gopis, they forget about, they're married and they have children, and what they're doing may appear to be immoral. They don't notice any of these things. They're so entranced, it's a nice word, entranced, by one another's beauty and qualities. In the spiritual sky, the Vaikuntha, see, like for example, when Lord Shiva saw Mohini Murti, he was with his wife at that time. Parvati or was with him. He completely forgot his wife and started running after Mohini Murti to try and embrace her. He was so overwhelmed by her beauty, you see. So, but that's, you know, and then actually he also ejaculated, and just by chasing her, and then that liquid became gold in the material world. But anyway, that's besides the point. The main thing is that the beauty of Krishna is way beyond anything we can imagine. And one who sees Krishna in his pristine youth is completely overwhelmed, and they forget everything else and become completely entranced by his beauty. So in the spiritual sky, the Vaikuntha planets are predominated by Narayana. His devotees have the same features as he does. In other words, their bodies look very similar to Narayana's. And the exchange of devotion there is on the platform of reverence. Reverence means there's a lot of formality, right? Just like we're saying, you know, if you're on the altar, you know, you have to be there in a reverent mode. You know, no frivolity, no unnecessary talking, no joking or anything like that, no laughing. You have to be focused completely. And same thing in the kitchen. You have to be focused completely on pleasing Krishna. It's not a place for small talk. So, but above all these Vaikuntha planets is Goloka, or Krishna Loka, where the original personality of Godhead, Krishna, fully manifests his pleasure potency in free, loving affairs. Since the devotees in the material world know almost nothing about these affairs, the Lord desires to show these affairs to them. So therefore he comes to this world, to Vrindavan, and manifests his transcendental pastimes, right? Because we don't know anything about what is real love and affection in the spiritual world, right? And it says he fully manifests his pleasure potency in free, loving affairs. So in Vaikuntha, there's a lot of formality. Everything is ritualized. Everything is reverent. Everything is sober. And there's no, what you would say, call spontaneity. It's all regulated. It doesn't mean that people are bored or people are stuffy or anything like that, but it's just the mood. Just like the mood that should be on the altar, the mood that should be in the temple itself, and the mood that should be in the kitchen. It should be very sober and full of attention to detail to please the Lord. But in Goloka, it's different. And what is the difference? There's freedom in loving affairs. So one glimpse of that when Arjuna apologizes to Krishna after he sees the universal form. He said, look, sometimes I had my head on your lap and I was dangling my feet in the air. We're buddies, we're friends. You're my bud, I'm your bud. I realized that actually I was being inappropriate, acting like that with you. You're the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and I feel very sorry that I was so intimate with you or frivolous, you see. But that's what's going on in Goloka. It's free, loving affairs. There's no formalities anymore. And sometimes it looks like they're actually breaking principles. Actually, they're not. But it looks like that, Like, for example, someone gets up on Krishna's shoulders and they're playing a game of, what do you call that? One is on the shoulders of another and then they're fighting, right? Or someone hides, comes up behind Krishna and puts their hands on his eyes and says, guess who it is? So you would never do anything like that with Narayana, right? But in Goloka, those type of things are going on. It's very free, loving exchanges. So in Goloka Vrindavan, there's an exchange of love known as Parakya Rasa. It is something like attraction of a married woman for a man other than her husband. In the material world, this sort of relationship is most abominable because it is a perverted reflection of the Parakya Rasa in the spiritual world, where it is the highest kind of loving affair. Such feelings between the devotee and the Lord are presented by the influence of Yogamaya. The Bhagavad Gita states that devotees of the highest grade are under the care of Daivamaya or Yogamaya, Mahatmanas tu mam partha daivim pakritim asritaha, Bhagavad Gita 9:13. The Mahatmas are under the influence of the Daivi Maya, the spiritual energy of Krishna called Yogamaya. Those who are actually great souls, Mahatmas, are fully absorbed in Krishna consciousness, always engaged in the service of the Lord. They are under the care of Daivi Prakriti or Yogamaya. Yogamaya creates a situation in which the devotee is prepared to transgress all regulative principles simply to love Krishna. A devotee naturally does not like to transgress the laws of reverence for the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but by the influence of Yogamaya, he's prepared to do anything to love the Supreme Lord better. Well, there's an example of this. Lord Chaitanya had a servant named Govinda, and every day Govinda would serve the Lord very, very diligently and lovingly. And after the Lord would have his, let's say, his lunch, then he would take a nap. And he was staying in the, actually in a very small room. And he was over 7 feet tall. So his body barely fit in that room. It was so small. You can visit that room today in Jagannath Puri. Anyway, so Govinda would massage his feet and his legs and to help him go to sleep and relax after the meal. And he would start on one side of the body of the Lord, and the Lord's body was like, some of his body was outside the door, right? Not the whole body, but part of it. So he would have to cross over the Lord to massage him. So actually he would go into the room first, then the Lord would lay down, and now he's inside the room, right? So, but he would massage him there. So Lord Chaitanya took rest, and when he woke up, he saw that Govinda was still there. And so he was, well, actually no, Govinda started from the outside massaging him, right? And he had to, and then eventually got on the inside to massage him, right? So, but when Lord Chaitanya woke up, Govinda was on the inside. And he said, Govinda, he said, you did not go take your lunch? He said, no, my lord. He said, why not? He said, because I had to cross over to your body to massage the other leg, he said. But I was not ready to cross over your body to go take lunch. In other words, he was willing to transgress normal etiquette by crossing over the body of Lord Chaitanya to serve him, but not to serve himself. So he just waited until the Lord woke up, maybe an hour or two later, and he didn't take his lunch. So that is the mood in the spiritual world, that one will do anything to please the Lord, but not to please themselves. Right? And this is not something normal in this world. Everyone's working to please themselves most of the time. So therefore it says here that those who are actually great souls, Mahatmas, are fully absorbed in Krishna consciousness, always engaged in the service of the Lord. They are under the care of Daivi Prakriti, or Yogamaya. Yogamaya creates a situation in which the devotee is prepared to transgress all regulative principles simply to love Krishna. A devotee naturally does not like to transgress the laws of reverence for the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but by the influence of Yogamaya, he's prepared to do anything to love the Supreme Lord better. Those under the spell of the material energy cannot at all appreciate the activities of Yogamaya. For a conditioned soul can hardly understand the pure reciprocation between the Lord and his devotee. But by executing devotional service under regulative principles, one can become very highly elevated and then begin to appreciate the dealings of pure love under the management of Yogamaya. So I know we read this before, but every time you look at this, you see that there's deeper and deeper meanings here that we might have missed before, because this is a subject that is very difficult to understand because of our conditioning, birth after birth, for hundreds, maybe millions of births in the material world. So we'll read some more about this tomorrow. And also, we're going to get into the subject of Cupid. So Cupid is the Roman personality in their pantheon of gods that they borrowed from the Greeks. And in the Greeks, they didn't call him Cupid, they called him Eros, the god of love. But the Greeks got it from the Vedas, because Kamadeva is god of love, and or the demigod of love, not the god, but the demigod. So we'll have we'll hear about, because Prabhupada talks about Cupid. He uses the word Cupid. He doesn't say Kamadeva, and it's very interesting, the story of Kamadeva, and it gets into also Krishna Lila, because at one point Krishna's son Pradyumna is the reincarnation of Kamadeva. So we'll talk about that tomorrow. Hari Bol. All glories to Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.
Maharaj, one question on yesterday's.
Yeah.
Last night's.
Last night.
And there was one answer given by Siddhanta Saraswati that the high birth is a deterrent.
It's a deterrent, yes.
But then in the 6th chapter, 41st verse, where a yogi after unsuccessful journey, again, he might be born in an aristocratic family.
Yes.
So how are they?
Well, that's a reward for pious activity in previous life, right? So the aristocratic family, at least now, you take birth in the aristocratic family, the children are usually degraded. They just completely attached to sense gratification because they have so many privileges, right? But previously, like Prahlad Maharaj is born aristocratic family. Dhruva Maharaj is born aristocratic family. And so many other great devotees, even the Goswamis, many of them were born in prominent families, right? And they attained prominent positions. So you can go either way, but the real advantage of being born in aristocratic families, you don't have to worry about working really hard to earn a living, right? You could completely dedicate yourself to Krishna consciousness right from the beginning to the end. So it's a facility due to pious activity. It's not a guarantee that you'll become a pure devotee, because you would have to, like for example, Prabhupada was not born in an aristocratic family, but he was born in a family of Vaishnavas, and his father was just a shopkeeper, basically. He sold grains. He was a humble person, but he was a real devotee. So Prabhupada got training right away from the youngest age in Krishna consciousness. And whatever he learned from his father, it stayed with him. But when he went to college, he admits that his dedication to Krishna consciousness weakened in college. But then when he met his spiritual master, everything his father taught him was reaffirmed, and much more also by Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. So, people can be born in an aristocratic family, or even better, they're born in a family of pure Vaishnavas, so that they can continue their spiritual perfection. But nowadays, you get born in an aristocratic family, most of the time the kids turn out bad because of they have a silver spoon in their mouth, right? They take it for granted that their life is all about sense gratification. That's unfortunate. So, I can show you where Prabhupada says it's better to be poor and not highly educated in modern education, because it just teaches you to become an atheist and a sense gratifier. So, and oftentimes, like, I know there are different families nowadays. The daughter doesn't get married until maybe she's 30, right? Or doesn't get married at all, because she gets highly educated, becomes a professional, completely abandons anything spiritual that she might have been taught when she was younger, right? And ends up either getting married with some mundane person and living a mundane life, or not getting married at all, because no one is good enough for her because of her high education and the fact that she's monetarily independent. So you're seeing this a lot now, even amongst Indian families, because it's better not to be educated, and just be educated in what you call home affairs, right? Sewing, cooking, knitting, cleaning, making offerings, and being a devotee rather than being a professional with very high qualifications and working day and night and just making money. So, you have to think carefully about, what is the purpose of life? So it's a better advantage. But see, if you're born in a poor family, then you have to work. You're struggling, right? But oftentimes, in poorer families, they have stronger family bonds not all the time, but if they're religiously oriented, and they're satisfied with loving relationships that they have with their family members, and they work cooperatively, and they're always respectful of mother and father, and so it's more traditional type of a model. Whereas the kids get educated, and they leave the home and hearth, and one kid's in Japan, another kid's in the United States, another kid's in Russia, and they're making money, and they only see their parents maybe once every 5 years or 10 years. So this whole modern way of living, due to education, is breaking down these traditional, family roles. Right? Now, that's good and bad. Prabhupada did say that it was good in one sense because the kids are more ready to accept Krishna consciousness. At least in the 1960s and 70s, it was like that because kids were revolting against the traditional life and the traditional family. And it's bad in other ways because the kids don't get the generational training that was there before. Right? So, anyway, if you take the Krishna consciousness and all these apparent advantages or disadvantages disappear, and everything can become purified. So that's what we're trying to do. Haribol.